Hello everyone, how's it going? I'm WoWcrendor and welcome back to more Fishing with Crendor. This is like episode 25 or something. We fished a lot. And today we are joined by Terran Gregory.
Hello.
Hello. And for people that don't know Terran Gregory, shame on you. Uh, but why don't you tell everybody what you do? Because I feel like most people are going to be like, wow, that's your job?
So, my title is Project Director in Blizzard Animation, which was called Cinematics, but they've recently decided to call it Blizzard Animation.
Hmm.
And I direct the in-game cutscenes for World of Warcraft.
And you've done that for a long time, right?
It's been going on for a little while now. The first in-game cutscene, of course, was the Wrathgate in Wrath of the Lich King, which we are sitting right here in Northrend. So, a
Yep,
little bit of a
very fitting.
flashback. But we made the Wrathgate in-game cutscene when I was a associate video editor working in video and post-production. And from that point on, they really liked what we had done with that, and we continued to make in-game cutscenes.
Yeah. So I know you got hired at Blizzard because you were a Machinima guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not like for the company, but you made Machinima.
Oh yeah. Back in the early days, 2005, during Vanilla, um, the first BlizzCon had a movie contest, and my friend Ezra Ferguson and I decided to make an entry for the Machinima contest, which would have been the first one that they did at the
Hmm.
first BlizzCon. And we made Return, a Warcraft motion picture, using our characters at the time uh, as the main characters in this little story we created. And we didn't think it was gonna go anywhere. In fact, our friends were all kind of making fun of us. Oh, your little RP fantasy movie. That's cute. And we're like, oh, whatever. If
Yeah.
anything, we're gonna enjoy it because it's a story about our WoW characters and even these characters that we'd had before World of Warcraft. So when we put it out, it got a really positive response and ended up being one of the five winners. And so they invited us to come down to BlizzCon. We met a few people there, including Shane DeBeery, who was the lead producer of World of Warcraft at the time. Had some good conversations, and then a few months later, when we continued to make some fun uh, World of Warcraft Machinima stories, we went to E3 2006 and talked to some of the community people there, and they asked if we'd be interested in possibly doing Machinima for Blizzard, and that started a series of events and being interviewed, and then I got the job.
So was that like your dream job at that point?
I don't even think Dream Job encapsulates
Yeah.
uh, how it how it went down. At the time, I was working as a tech writer for
Mm.
Atari Infogram up in Seattle, and I'd been studying film and video production. I'd done some classes at University of Washington Extension, and you know, you want to dream big and think, oh, where am I going to go? What do I want to be? And at the time, like the biggest my logical side of my brain would allow me to dream would be, well, maybe at some point there will be a video game company that has a video department that I might be able to, just be an editor in.
Yeah.
That sounds like a dream job,
Yeah.
right? That would be just dreamy.
Yeah.
To go from that concept to no, you're gonna be a animation editor director at Blizzard on World of Warcraft. That wasn't a dream job. That was absolutely incomprehensible at the time. Even right up until I was actually hired, it was completely incomprehensible.
So, what did you like first put your video on YouTube, or was it strictly for like the Blizzard thing, or did YouTube not even exist when you made the?
There was no YouTube, or if there was, it just hadn't taken off yet, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I remember being at Atari and someone was watching something on YouTube at some point, and I was like, "What is that?" Right? It was like that. It was that early. Uh, But my friends and I had been doing some online videos. Fortunately, all those things have died, and no one can find them, even if they were looking for them, because that would be terrible.
Yeah.
But this was an era and a time in which, to have any video online, you had to compress little tiny QuickTime movies that were like just infinitesimally small. And because there was no, advanced codecs uh, compressors for video yet, they looked terrible, and they were microscopically small, and they had to be downloaded and played in QuickTime. And uh, when we released Return, actually, it was a Windows Media file, about 40 megabytes, and we had to find places to upload it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some File Planet stuff, but those had registration things, and so we wanted something easier to be able to just have people grab it. So one of my friends from high school said, "Oh, well, my job has a server that you could put it up on and hotlink it." And we're like, "That sounds great." So we put a copy up there and we linked that from our website. And then the next day, Penny Arcade linked the video in their news.
Mm.
And it got like 200,000 downloads and killed our friend's server, which was
Oh,
not
wow.
his server. It was his job's server. So he got, I think, pretty busted as far as why did our internet service provider just shut down our website? And it was because Penny Arcade had essentially destroyed them by hotlinking our video on their server. So yes, the plight of the days before YouTube. We don't have any ability to look back on those videos we made and say, "Hey, look at the number of views Return got," because it was spread out between Warcraft movies and File Planet and private hosts and whatnot. So there was probably a lot, but we have no idea what the actual metric is.
Yeah. God, that's like the Stone Age of internet video.
Yeah, back in the MySpace, pre-Facebook, pre iPhone, it's been a long time.
People using AOL Instant Messenger.
Trillion, man.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I still have
gotta
Trillion.
MSN and AOL together. With IRQ, ICQ. That's what.
Yeah, I still have Trillion on my one computer, just to talk with like two people that I have from back then.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. So let's go way back and find out how you got into just video games in general, because I always like to ask that to everybody.
Video games in general. I've often been extremely thankful that my parents were nerds.
Nerds.
And we're talking like the most beautiful old school pre nerd as far as like in the 60s and 70s reading the Heinlein novels and the H.G. Wells novels and then
Mm-hmm.
C.J. Sherry novels, and these things were all on the shelf of my parents' bookshelves. Um, and they loved science fiction and they loved fantasy, which is of course how I ended up being named Terran Justice. Because Terran was actually a word developed by the authors in the 50s of science fiction novels because bad 1930s and 40s movies had ruined Earthling. And even today, when you hear the word Earthling, it comes with the connotation of a giant robot saying puny Earthling,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no way you
Mhm.
can hear it without thinking that. So the authors needed a word for the people of Earth that didn't sound diminutive. And they decided on using Terran, meaning Terra, and of Earth. It's Latin for of the Earth, right?
Yeah.
And so my parents were essentially reading the same science fiction novels that, Metzen was reading when he decided to name the StarCraft race Terran
Mm-hmm.
because it's canonically science fiction. So they were completely into all things nerdy. They had all the fantasy board games, Dragon Master, stuff like that. And they also were on the front line of buying early game consoles. Um, from the moment I was born. You know, we had the Intellivision 2 and the Atari 2600 and the Odyssey 2 platform, you know, these ancient game consoles. So some of the earliest memories I had were playing like B-17 Bomber on the Intellivision or Taz or Adventure on the Atari 2600, you know, just memories from almost not even being able to walk yet. If that's even possible,
I
right?
have no idea what any of the things you just said are.
You have to go look them up after this and check it out
I'm
because
part of the new age of internet kids.
so I was already steeped in that, right, when I was really young, but of course the age variation was just about right. So when the NES came out, that would have been like the thing that, you know, 6-year-old Terran wanted incredibly bad.
Yeah.
You know, one of my friends when I was in first grade had one, and so I remember going there after school to play Super Mario Brothers 1 with him and be like, oh my god, you know, just eventually got one of my own, and the game that really captivated me the most was Legend of Zelda on the original cartridge, the gold one.
Mm-hmm.
And I played that thing into oblivion. I had this goofy little loft in my child bedroom that was like they built. My dad had built like a second floor in my bedroom, basically like a giant bunk bed, but beyond that. And
Yeah.
up on top, I had this little tiny green monitor from our Apple II computer, completely monochrome green, but it had the composite input, so I was able to plug my Nintendo into that, and that was the coolest thing in the world, was being able to play the Nintendo on my own little monitor in my bedroom on my bunk bed. But it was funny because after a long time, that was all monochrome. It was like basically playing it in black and white.
Yeah.
And on the weekend, when I would unplug my NES from there, go out in the living room, plug it in, it would be like, oh, the glory of seeing Zelda in color after having played it in black and white for a week. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. So the fast summation after that would be, yeah, played NES like crazy. Super Nintendo came out, played that like crazy. And then everything took a wild turn when Wolfenstein 3D came out. And my dad, being the techno guy that he was, always wanted to just have the technology. Had what was the computer we played on? It was probably a 486 SX 25 megahertz.
25 whole megahertz.
Yeah, so like today we have computers with like 3600 megahertz or overclocked to 4600 megahertz, and this computer ran at 25 megahertz. And we got a copy of the shareware of Wolfenstein 3D, and my dad and I would play that together, and it was just crazy fun. And I don't know that I ever really was as into consoles after that point in time. I just became a crazy PC gamer, playing all the Aces Over Europe flight simulators back in the day, and because my dad was a big World War II plane, you know, nut, so knew all the names of all the planes, and of course B-17 Bomber, having played that the Intellivision 10 years prior, and now much more advanced, even though remedial by today's standards. But then the sequence from that point on would have been the most memorable games were, you know, Doom, followed by all of the Sierra adventure games, highlights being like the Quest for Glory series and King's Quest through number 6. Gabriel Knight was still probably one of my top 5 games, just because the atmosphere of that game they had put together in such an early time. And that brings us to Quake. I was just saying this actually because Diablo's 19th anniversary was on New Year's Eve.
Yep.
19th anniversary. Oh my gosh. Which made me think back that, you know, my birthday is early February, and so that's coming up, but it was actually my birthday right after Diablo had come out that I got the copy of Diablo and a copy of Quake 1. And talk about just like formative, like one birthday I received a copy of Diablo 1 and a copy of Quake 1. It's just like, oh, that's what I was doing for the next year.
It's a pretty solid birthday.
Pretty solid birthday.
So is Diablo 1 your first Blizzard game?
No, my first Blizzard game would have been Warcraft 1. And the funny tale of that was my family was taking a trip back to a small town in Washington State where I was actually born. And I'm not going to say where it was because that's
Yeah.
typically a security question on online quizzes.
That's a good point.
But we hadn't been back there in years, and so there was these family friends that I'd remembered hanging out with when I was like, I don't know, a toddler.
Hmm.
And one of them was his name was Craig, and he was like, "Oh, dude, come and check out this thing I got." And he's on his PC, and it was I think it was a 5.25-inch disc shareware of Warcraft 1. So we were sitting there
When I
playing
hear that, I think of like the AOL discs.
Oh, dude. This is the big, huge, square, ancient, 3.5 inch discs. But we played that all night long, and I came back. I told my dad about it, and he thought it sounded cool, so we ended up picking that up and playing that as well. And my dad ended up getting really into real-time strategy. He played a lot of Warcraft 2 and a lot of StarCraft, whereas I actually deviated a little bit more into the FPS genre during those years. Followed up by Quake 2, which we got it, and then during Quake 2, when everyone was playing that, that's when the first 3D FX accelerators started coming out, and so installing that for the first time and having your video go from 320 by 200 pixels to suddenly being 4 times that resolution at really high frame rate was like a revolution in gaming.
Yeah.
And then you looked at that, and then you looked over at the guys that were still playing consoles, and you compare Quake 2 on a 3D FX glide card versus like Mario 64.
Yeah.
One looked like it was 20 years ahead of the other one. And you're like, whoa.
I must feel like nowadays we're almost like spoiled. We're just like, oh, this game's not like 1080p 60 FPS.
Oh, these graphics are awful. It's like, okay.
It's like, did you play games 10 years ago?
It was really fast. And that would be right around when I played my first MMO, which was Asheron's Call. I missed the EverQuest train. I never played that. But Asheron's Call came out, and I ended up really, really enjoying that game. And that's where my friends had created our guild and our characters that would later become the story of Return. And after that, we played some Dark Age of Camelot when that came out, Neverwinter Nights. And then finally, that brings us to around 2004.
Good old World of Warcraft. So, did you just come across World of Warcraft randomly, or were you like prepped for it? Were you like ready to go?
I had a, pretty solid group of friends that were all big gamers. Was living still, I think. Was I living? No, I was already in my own place by then. But this group of pals that I'd played Dark Age of Camelot with, and even Smash Bros. Call, we'd all heard about World of Warcraft, and we all were big Blizzard fans, and we were really excited about the prospect of them making an MMO to see what that was really going to be like. So we all jumped in the beta the moment it became open. We hadn't played closed beta or signed up for it prior, but played open beta and got really, really stoked on it. And then there happened to be this phenomenal just coincidence that, Vanilla WoW was launched around Thanksgiving in 2004. And I was living in Seattle at the time, but I'd already made travel plans to spend Thanksgiving with my mother, who lived in Southern California. And I happened to be going down there for Thanksgiving. And then I had seen online, having played the open beta for WoW for the last few weeks, the news on it was, oh, we were having this opening event in, Orange County at Fry's in Fountain Valley, and it's gonna, can get your box signed by the developers and blah blah blah. I'm like, and I mentioned it offhand to my mom, and she's like, sure, let's go do that. So she drove me down from Bakersfield, 2.5 hours south to Fountain Valley, where she stood with me in line And when we arrived, probably heard tales of this from other people who were there, but Fry's is essentially the size of like a big Walmart, right?
Yeah.
And the line, we arrived there maybe an hour. We should have been there way earlier than we were, but traffic or, you know.
Yeah.
The line had already come out from the center of the building, went back around the entire building, back to the front side of the building, around the entire parking lot, back behind the building again, and then down the road, and then like 3 blocks down the road.
Oh my god.
So no one was expecting like however many people to
Yeah.
show up. Uh, and when I met some people who worked there, they later told me that the response was so ridiculous that they had employees like running back to get more copies of the game and shovel them into their car. It's just like we weren't ready for this.
You were not prepared.
But my mom, being the super trooper that she was, stood with me in line until like 2:30 in the morning to get a copy of WoW that night.
How long did that take?
Uh, that was like 3.5 hours. Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Because like they didn't expect at all like WoW to be that big of a game.
Oh, they were hoping, maybe some people will come out. Maybe some things will, No. They had no idea the loyalty of the brand that they had already created.
Yeah. It's crazy too. I always tell a story because like I heard about WoW and it was like a month after it. It was like January 1st. It was around like right now, and I was like, oh, I'll go get WoW, and like you couldn't buy it online because it was like you couldn't get the digital copy because it wasn't a thing.
That
So
was
you
not
had
a
to go
thing
to the
yet.
store. Yeah, so nobody had it. Like Best Buy, all the GameStops I looked at, and there was like literally one GameStop an hour away that had 2 copies left. And when I got there, they had 1 copy left. And I was like, oh my god, this is insane. And so I got that copy, and I was just like, oh yeah. Because I mean, I decided I wasn't going to get it for a while, and then I listened to my friends play it, and they're like, dude, we just took a Zeppelin, and there's raptors killing us. And I'm like, I want to die to raptors.
I need a raptor.
So it was just, yeah, it was crazy. And even like now, where people look at the game, they're like, oh man, only like 6 million people are playing it or whatever. It's like, it's still a lot of people. Like, there's games that would kill to have 6 million people playing it.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the numbers are just kind of subjective as far as just what is the measure of success and health, and can't really get into detail on that because it's not my measure of department. But
Yeah.
it's definitely wild, and a lot of people still loving the game, myself included.
True facts. So, obviously, then that happened, and then you got your job at Blizzard. So, what was like your first like thing you did at Blizzard? Like, you started day one, you go in there. Like, what did you do?
There's actually a really, really funny moment right there. So it kind of blends between that and my interview. I show up and I go to the front desk, and I put my application across to the receptionist, and she looks at it and sees, the name Taran, and she gives me this look like, really? And I'm like, oh, come on. No, I'm not that guy. That's just my parents again. So that was funny, and they set me up in an office that was over in the corner of the building. And at this time, all of Blizzard development was just in one building. We've sprawled out to 7 buildings in the last 10 years, but at this time, one building contained all of the development teams, which was crazy. And this corner room that they put us in was actually adjacent to Chris Metzen's office. Like, he was right next door to us,
Yeah.
which was just wild. But in that first day, I came in, I sat down, I was like, oh, like this computer, oh my gosh. Oh wait, Mac. I don't know how to use Final Cut. This is gonna be interesting. Uh, um, and then the guy who was sitting behind me, who I think I'd seen at one point, maybe during my interview process, but I didn't know him. And he turns around to me and he says, "So, Taran, did you know that my character is Nag in game?" And I look at this guy who I've never met in my life, who's sitting in the same office, working in this new department with me, and I go, "You are the SOB that stole my pants in Zul'Gurub?" And it was like, wait, no, this guy had been in my guild. We've been on the same server in the same guild since vanilla, and now I'm sitting next to him in this office. It just seemed like a quantum impossibility. And beyond that, we played the same class in the same guild, and he outrolled me on my pants. And I'm just like, what? How does that even work?
That is crazy.
Yeah. So that was wild. And then I later learned that because of the nature of the fact that I started on day one, there was only like 3 Pacific Coast PvP servers back when they were actually designated by coasts.
Yeah.
In the first week before they were like, this isn't going to work. We just need people to go wherever.
Yeah.
But because of that, a lot of the core employees were on my server, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because there weren't many that started on day one.
Yeah.
So I came to learn that actually a lot of people I knew worked at Blizzard, and it was very wild. These, you think of it like The Incredibles, where they're all like in their daily lives with their secret suit on. They're like, ah, no, I'm actually this guy. What? So that was a very interesting experience.
Does he still work there?
Oh yeah, Brandon actually he's still in my department, and he was my go-to guy on creating the wrathgate. Like a lot of people were involved in that project, but as far as people who were full-time on that project from beginning to end, it was pretty much just me and Brandon.
So was wrathgate like your first actual like project, or was like there stuff before it where like you didn't lead it but you were a part of it?
The first project I did was the Eastern Plaguelands PvP trailer for patch 1.12.
Yeah.
Looking back on that, it's like, oh.
I don't even remember that. What was that one?
It was the towers in the Eastern Plaguelands where there was PvP going on.
I remember that. I just don't remember like how you could make a trailer. Don't know how you can make a trailer out of it, or I don't remember the trailer. Oh yeah, there's the sand and Syllabus too.
Yeah, no, that was not the one that I had worked on. That was the other one, but I did the Eastern Plaguelands one.
Yeah.
And that was literally like the first week. It was like, I don't know how to do any of this yet. I'm just gonna do my best. And so we put that together, and it was pretty good. And then there was a few other projects here and there. I was in video production, so I was working on the DVDs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Black Temple really was my first project that I was kind of given autonomy on, as far as like, okay, here's your project, go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So Mickey Nielsen had written the script for that one, and then they gave me the script recorded with the Commons voice actor, and then we worked on crafting the trailer from that. And that was really the one that caught a lot of people's attention, as far as like, wow, it seems like this in-game machinima stuff could be a vehicle for doing really good, cool things. And it kind of opened the door for them thinking of, oh, what else could we do with this? And eventually they said, wow, what if we had them do the wrathgate? So
like, what is the process of doing one of those? Because I know you just said like you got the script and then the voices. So like, what's the whole process like?
Well, it's clearly evolved a lot over the years. In the early days, it wasn't all that unlike when I was doing Machinima on my own. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have a copy of the game and you had a script and just had to figure out, okay, I need enough shots to cover
Yeah.
the 3 minutes of dialogue here. So let's get in and start acquiring things and putting them together. But as the stories got more elaborate and involved, we started using storyboard artists to create our animatics and get those approved before embarking on crafting those shots. Um, and then over the subsequent years, as the team became larger and the throughput became bigger and the expectations became higher, it starts to really, really feel more like a classic film production. So
Mm-hmm.
everything you'd imagine going through on a movie, as far as pre-production and getting involved with VO talent, recording it, laying it out, moving into animation layout, working with the animators on crafting the performance, and then having lighters create the visual look and aesthetic. And
It's a
probably
long way
way
from.
too much for to summarize, but
Yeah, that's coming a long way from Eastern Plaguelands PvP.
yeah, I mean, it's been a decade of development, and so having started as very much just a wing it as best we can with a small ragtag crew with whatever's available, to arriving at essentially just a microcosm of cinematics as a whole, but using in-game uh, visual assets to create it, is really where we've come to.
And so, like with Wrathgate, did you know it was going to be that big, or like did you just think like, oh, this is cool, whatever, we'll do it?
Big in the context of what?
Like how many people really liked it, and how like much it would advance like that whole in-game cinematic thing forward.
Oh, I think from the moment uh, we received the script for that one, we took a look at it and we were like, oh. And I think I'm actually just repeating what I said on the behind the scenes disc in Warlords of Draenor. There was a Machinima in World of Warcraft behind the scenes thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we touched on this very subject a little bit. And we saw the script, we took it back, and I talked to some of the other guys that were going to be working on it. And the sensation was, do they even understand what they just gave us? I feel like it was a mistake because we were just making gameplay trailers and cutting them for web, and out of nowhere they're asking us to make this in-game cinematic for World of Warcraft, which there hadn't been any yet. And so I'd say from minute one, we really knew the gravity of what was at stake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that there was an opportunity being affronted to us that, should we do really, 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 really well, this might open up a lot of doors to be able to continue doing this into the future. It kind of lit a fire under our bums to do the absolute best we could. Just like, this is my one shot.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the playoff game. If you pull this off, then it's going to change the trajectory of everything going forward, and that's how we felt. And I think that contributed to why we threw everything we could at it and really, really, really pushed ourselves to create something that was arguably beyond our capabilities
Mm-hmm.
at the time.
Yeah.
We did our best, and I think that the result showed just how much we loved what we were doing and excited for the opportunity to just make a cinematic experience.
So, aside from the Wrathgate, what would you say is the favorite, like, cinematic or in-game cinematic you've made?
Oh, that's Trixie. Um. Mm,
Because, I mean, you've made pretty much all of them, or the vast majority of them, right? Or been involved with them.
yeah, there's been a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, I've had a hand in most of the WoW in-game stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the one that really was the rocket of consciousness was the Siege of Orgrimmar trailer. Um, for many reasons. That was a big turning point for us technologically.
Hmm.
A lot of things had aligned with people within our division coming to help us try to develop and become a little bit more fundamentally robust as a division.
Hmm.
And it was also a a very open-ended, like, okay, here's kind of the basic outline of what we'd like to see for Siege of Orgrimmar trailer. Um, I just got journeyman fisherman. I had not leveled up fishing on this character, uh, but uh,
You lose yourself in the fishing.
the achievement just totally threw my vibe. Um, so we had an opportunity to really, really push ourselves on that project, to captivate the whole kung fu vibe and bring the conflict with Garrosh and just even small technological things that aren't really noticeable in hindsight, but like the bridge during the fight scene would actually react to their motion, like when they'd slam into the bridge, the bridge would sway, and the
Oh yeah.
detachable chains. That all
Hmm.
seems very, very basic, but those were actually things that we'd never tried to do before. We tried to avoid doing anything of that nature because we didn't really have the methodology to do it the way we'd like yet. But that was the
Hmm.
first one we were like, no, well, what if we could do that? And then the guys on the tech end were like, yeah, you could totally do that. And then it evolved not just in that, but also in the story end to be like, oh, well, then we could have him do this and this and this. And then things started getting really wild. And when people saw just the level of combat and intensity in that piece, it was definitely a huge leap forward from what we'd created in the past. Um, but I'd have to say I'm biased toward more recent material. I mean, there's a lot of nostalgia for the Wrathgate, of course, being the first one that I'm most proud of, just because of uh, what we were able to achieve with the limitations that we had at the time.
Hmm.
But I think one of the pieces I'd pushed myself and my team hardest on was actually the Battle for Shattrath encounter, just because the it was kind of a challenge for me as a storyteller that it was a very climactic, bombastic, kind of the way that you'd imagine a climax in a motion picture going down, right?
Yeah.
All these different things coming together simultaneously and spinning up until something spectacular happens. And we hadn't really done anything structurally like that with the in-game cutscenes. Usually they're very much in the moment, in one place, in one time, in a linear fashion.
Hmm.
But this one, having to balance the ticking clock of the weapon over here and dealing with Duratan over here and Urel over here, and that it's spinning around and going through the A plot, B plot, C plot, A B C A B C A B C A B C, until boom, it all explodes in the end.
Yeah.
Uh, in hindsight, it's easy to go, oh well, that worked really well and that's really cool. But when you're doing it, it's really challenging to be all like, are we pushing it too far? Is it becoming incomprehensible? Are we want to, do we want to clarify this or simplify it to keep it, uh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
uh, so it was a big challenge, and we really wanted to push ourselves to make that the most exciting thing that we've done in that regard. So really proud of the way that one came together.
So, you play Alliance, and you said you've always played Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
So, what made you pick the Alliance over the Horde?
Let's see here. I would have to say fundamentally, as I mentioned before, Return was based on a story of our characters that had actually predated World of Warcraft.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Ezra and I had a guild that probably started as early as Baldur's Gate. I mean, we're talking like 1998 or something, right?
Yeah.
So we had these characters that were always in this guild, and they kind of had their own history and their own relationships and their own concept of what it was to be about in their hierarchy and what they fought against.
Mm.
And that persisted through a few different games. And when we came to World of Warcraft, we still wanted to play those characters, and of course they aren't orcs. uh, they were human, so a lot of the characters that me and my core group of friends started in World of Warcraft were all human, just so we could continue doing the story
Mm-hmm.
that we had created. And my first character was a priest. It was the character in Return, um, and I played that priest almost exclusively all throughout vanilla. In fact, to this day, even though I haven't really played that character much since vanilla, like seriously,
Mm-hmm.
I like played it all through vanilla, but then, like I mentioned before, Burning Crusade came out, and I was playing arenas, and I had gone to mage to play arenas, um, and I just have not gone back to play my priest since then. And I think part of it was falling in love with gnomes,
Yeah.
with
I
my
do know you
mage.
love gnomes.
And we didn't get gnome priests until Cataclysm.
Yep.
So I'd been going hard gnome since Burning Crusade. Uh, but I'd played my priest so much in vanilla that even when I outline all my characters still, she's still the highest played individual character by playtime.
Oh, wow.
Just because it was never playing anything else, and I've kind of been at least like a semi-altaholic since then, so I hadn't ever played one character as much as I played my priest.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh,
Like with Horde, you said you made Horde for a bit, but you didn't like Horde. Like it didn't feel right. And I know a lot of people have that too. Like I know Jesse, for example, he like always is like, I love the Horde, Horde for life. I hate Alliance. Is that like how you feel, but with the Alliance?
I wouldn't call it an active. It doesn't really feel like an active thought process, right? It's not like
Yeah.
it's more so the fact that I just feel at home
Yeah.
on the Alliance side, and I just feel out of place on the Horde side. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
subjective thing as far as just I love Stormwind and I love the gnomes
Yeah.
and I love the the sensation and the aesthetic of the Alliance, and just I don't personally identify as much with the aesthetic or themes of the Horde.
Yeah.
I understand them and I appreciate them and I love it. You know, I love making Horde movies because it's a really cool thing to delve in and embark upon. But when it comes to where I want my hearth and home to be, it always tends to be with the Alliance characters.
That did like interest because like most of it does come down to more of the aesthetic of all the races and the factions and everything. But like I was curious of like how that impacted you with like doing the cinematics. Like, do you enjoy making the Alliance ones more, or like do you still enjoy the Horde ones? Obviously you do because you just said you do, but I was curious about it.
I don't know that my personal, bias is affect. Well, anyone can say that, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel my personal biases affect the storytelling vibe of that, just because they're very different things for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of storytellers have to be able to do things that aren't necessarily comfortable, whether it's subject matter or themes, or in fact, the more you can push outside your own comfort zone, the more powerful it usually is.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, working on any cinematic, the excitement always comes from just the power of the story, and not
Yeah.
so much of a personal bias toward, oh, well, I don't like this one because X. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the only reason I'm going to feel that way is if the story isn't strong, and if that's the case, then I should be taking all the effort I can to resolve that.
Yeah, that is true. So out of all your years at working at Blizzard, what are like some of your favorite kind of off the job moments where you're just kind of like eating lunch or just going about? I know they got like a gym there. Have you ever gone to the gym?
Not as much as I'd like. Off the job. I remember one late night working on the wrathgate in the wee hours of the evening. I was standing outside of my out of the door on campus, and I looked over, and it was really dark, but there's some little lanterns, and I see what I thought was a dog running behind the lantern, or just slinking behind the lantern. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's a big dog."
Mm-hmm.
But as it goes through the light, I see that its ears are round. So I was like, "Oh, that's a cougar."
Oh.
And just slinking through our campus. And I'm like, "Oh, what's up, buddy?" And that can happen. There's coyotes around, just because it's Southern California desert.
Yeah.
And there was at least one story of they had to quarantine an area because a bobcat had left her kittens in the bushes. And it's
Oh,
really dangerous because if mom came back and you were between the mom and the kittens in the bush, she might mom out on you.
yeah.
So they had to get animal control in to handle the baby bobcat debacle.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. But easily, my entire outside of work thing comes down to BlizzCon, as I'm sure you know and appreciate and understand
Yep.
that every BlizzCon every year, as long as I've been there, has just been an absolutely incredible experience. Steeped even deeper in the fact that I got to be at the first one as a fan, as a player, with no expectations, no understanding, no. And I went there and just meeting the people who make Blizzard, something that I had such vivid memories about from when I was younger, holding the Warcraft 2 box in my hands and seeing the Blizzard logo at the bottom, or
Mm.
the Diablo box with the big red Blizzard logo.
Yeah.
Those were like vivid memories from my youth. And then to actually be here and be meeting these people was just like, oh my gosh. Um, and I just remembered that was such a vivid, impactful experience that it wasn't long after. That was less than a year after that first BlizzCon where I got hired. And so subsequently, every BlizzCon I've been an employee. So for me, my favorite part about BlizzCon is knowing how much that experience meant to me when I was there as a player for my first BlizzCon. And it sounds cheesy and hokey and sentimental, but in the pay it forward mentality, I go to every BlizzCon with the hope to create that experience for as many people as possible. To make sure that they understand that this is interacting directly with Blizzard employees and Blizzard culture and Blizzard family.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I can just get around and make everyone's experience like, holy cow, we're actually here, a part of the Blizzard family with the Blizzard, employees. I just want to make that experience happen for as many people as possible.
It is really cool too how big it's gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I know looking back, like the first BlizzCon and stuff were just a fraction of the size of the current one.
Oh, yeah. Like less than 10,000 at the first one. Only like 2 halls were open.
Mm-hmm.
So, got
it has-
really big.
Yep. Well, I think that about does it.
Awesome!
So, do you got anywhere to promote for people to follow you on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Terran Gregory, just spelled exactly like my name.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the place to go to.
All right.
And I think that's about it.
All right. I can put a link to that in the description for all the lazy people. And yeah, thank you for joining me. That was fun.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, dude.
Reminiscing about this here World of Warcraft.
Yep.
All right.
And yeah. All right. See ya.